Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. Today we're talking about blue hour photography for wildlife. I've got a lot of photos and I've even got some tips and tricks to help you out with it. And we'll get to all of that right after this. In this video, we're going to talk about blue hour photography and why it can really be a beautiful time of day and how you can use it in your wildlife photography. We're going to discuss 6 tips and tricks. I'm going to work those tips and tricks into a series of images from myself and also some of my patrons who I've invited to this episode to share some of their brilliant work. But before we get into all of that, let's just talk about what is the blue hour. And if you were to research this or try to define it, typically it will be defined as the period of time before sunrise or after sunset, somewhere around 30 minutes. I will tell you, in that 30 minutes, depending on conditions, you can get this incredible variety of blue hour light. And I'll give you, again, some tips and tricks in this one to help you out with that. But let's just dive right in. And I want to show you how I rolled this into my Instagram on social media. I did a contest. I called it the Blue Hour Challenge. And I took hundreds of images. I pare them down to about 16 to 20. And then the audience votes in this bracket tournament format till we get to a winner. This is the grand prize winner. This is an image by Matz from Germany. I'll put his information down below. He and a friend were photographing this owl. And I can give you some of the specifics on this one. I do know we're going to talk about image settings and shutter speed. I will tell you this was shot very slow at 1/5 of a second. And that's actually going to roll into one of our first tips for blue hour photography. Before I get to the tip, though, I want to point out a couple things about this image. I told you blue hour can look very different. And this one doesn't necessarily have a ton of blue tones in it. But one thing that's very, very interesting, and it may not come through on YouTube, when you zoom into this image and you look at the eye of the bird, which is really what this photo is all about. The subject here is actually the eye. You can actually see this horizon, and you can actually see the blue tones of light coming through, filtered on top of the horizon. It's really, really interesting. I wish I had the ability to show this in a huge print where the viewer could appreciate the detail on this one. But yeah, just know that it's there. And while it may not have the classic blue hour look that's of some of the other photos we're going to see, I thought it was a brilliant piece. It did win my challenge, and I wanted to feature it here for you. So Matz, well done. Now, I do want to talk about tip number 1. And tip number 1 for blue hour photography is to be prepared. Be prepared for things like very slow shutter speeds. I put up a screech owl. I don't photograph a lot of owls, but this was a screech owl taken just after sunset, and you can actually see the raindrops on the owl's head. I wanted to include that detail. This was shot at a distance, but it was really an interesting subject because while I don't photograph owls a lot, this one was right on the side of a trail, only about 20 feet, and people were walking by it all day, had no idea it was there. It was one of the reasons I felt very comfortable photographing this owl without disruption is it was very used to human presence because this is the home it had chosen right along the side of a trail with people walking dogs all day long. So a very interesting subject for me. But when we come to being prepared, a couple things we want to think about. If you're shooting subjects at blue hour, you will probably be dealing with much less light. Remember, we talked about all light during blue hour is indirect, and some of it will be very, very low. The owl that I showed you before by Matz was shot at 1/5 of a second. Coincidentally, this was also shot at 1/5 of a second. Now, to do that, you are going to need some special equipment. At the very least, you're going to need a very stable head, tripod, and you may even want to think about things like trigger releases. I actually use a trigger release, which I don't use very often, and that's just a remote release so that I'm not actually touching the camera to put any vibration there. So a very stable base, of a good quality tripod, and possibly something like a cable release will help you be prepared if you are shooting these very slow shutter speeds. So something to consider, tip number 1 is just be prepared for lower light. I'm going to show you a couple other owls because these are popular blue hour subjects. And I will point out anything that's odd in terms of shutter speed, or in this case, we've got some motion blur going on. This was not intentional at the time, but it worked for me. So I did post this on social media. But this owl was perched, and it was well after sunset. The light was very, very low. My shutter speed was somewhere in the low, like 200th of a second, 300th of a, like somewhere in that range. and then the owl flew. And I was able to pan enough with the owl to get the head relatively sharp and in focus, and then the wings had this nice motion blur. Now, this is a technique I really like, but you can definitely see those blue tones coming through in the background and even on the bird itself. In editing this, I believe I used Topaz Sharpen to actually sharpen the head a little bit because it wasn't really out of focus. It certainly wasn't in focus, but I wanted to tighten that up and keep the motion blur in the wings. So selectively, I just applied a little bit of Topaz Sharpen AI to the head on this. And then this is a very good example. And this is a short-eared owl well past sunset. I talked to you about being prepared for lower light. And one of my other tips I'm going to get to in just a second is going to talk about the noise that you deal with. But in lower light, slower shutter speeds, but I'm still able to get some nice flight shots, which you normally don't think about this type of light for flight shots. But I wanted to show this as an example of something that I thought was very pretty. And I just love the background colors. When I posted this on social media, people asked me, did I fake that color or how did I get that color? There's nothing fake here. And while I certainly edit all of my backgrounds, there's hue and saturation adjustments, little things like that, but the color is the color. And that is created by the sun being below the horizon and allowing a different type of light to be filtered through. Now, this next subject is a northern harrier. This is not my image. This is Kristen Terwilliger, and she is a wonderful photographer. She's a patron of mine, and she entered this into the Blue Hour Challenge. It did quite well. There's a couple things I want to point out about this, and I included this for a very specific reason. This has a very icy feel, and this is a common theme with Blue Hour photography, and you can use this to your advantage. Technically, this may not be Blue Hour, and I'll tell you the reason I think it may not. If you look on the snow, you'll see a little bit of a shadow on the backside. It's very, very soft. Now, to me, that's an indication that the sun may have already come up, but it was probably a cloudy day where it was very filtered, and it still had this Blue Hour feel to it. So I think it's a wonderful image, and one of the feelings that Blue Hour can evoke is this feeling of icy frost. And it's a very popular technique. You can actually adjust the temperature of your images. So when I say warm and cool, warm generally yellow, orangish, cool generally bluish. When you cool the temperature of an image, you can get a similar effect to this. So you actually shift the white balance a little bit, and it brings out some of these cool tones. So it's an editing technique that you can also use. But here it really evokes that icy, cold, wintry feel. So I thought this was a great example. So thank you, Kristen, for submitting. Another one of my patrons, Becky Syring, submitted this. And again, I told you about the variety of Blue Hour conditions and some of the different lights that you can get. She said she was amazed as she was photographing this great gray owl that before sunrise, the light took on this hue, this pink glow. And she really wanted to capture that. And this great gray owl is a great example, not only of the beautiful subject, but just how interesting and varied this Blue Hour conditions could be. Now, the next series of images, I'm going to show you 3 from the same location, and it ties into tip number 2, which is be set up. And also tip number 3, which is to know the subjects and know the area. Now, that's a tip probably for all wildlife photography, but here's why it's really critical for Blue Hour. You can see here the tones in the sky, very pink. There's no golden tones in this image at all. And when I get a little bit later and as the light just starts to change, a little bit closer to dawn, you can see the colors, the sky actually changes. Now, this is the same day, just a few minutes later with a different subject, but you'll see more blues and purples and even a little orange up there in the background. Now, tip number 2, being set up, is critical because at this location, I had to be there before sunrise. It wasn't going to photograph the same way at sunset. The only spot that was accessible to me to get in the water and shoot this was going to be pre-sunrise. That was going to be the opportune time. So being set up was critical. I had to be in the water, or if I was shooting on the side of the water, in that area at least 30 minutes beforehand so that I could get set up, make sure my equipment was right, make sure I was comfortable, and then also give an opportunity for the subjects to move into the area, especially if I had disturbed anything on the way in. Now, fortunately, in this spot, the ducks come in and out all morning, so I felt pretty good, like I was going to have an opportunity. So being set up, especially if it's before sunrise, is absolutely critical. And yes, it's tough to get up that early, and yes, it's hard sometimes, especially in winter, to trudge out there and get this done. But the rewards are really, really terrific, and you'll get images that not a lot of other people are putting out there. And again, you can just see the difference in the sky, and that's really what blue hour photography starts to become about sometimes, is just color. Tip number 3 was knowing the area and the subject. I had to know where I could access this and what time of day. So knowing this area, what was important is, do I shoot it in the morning or do I shoot it at night? I already knew what I wanted to do in terms of this blue hour lighting, but what time of day was right? Was it morning or night? And again, I told you this location, the morning was the correct time. So tips number 2 and 3 are a little bit intertwined, but one, just making sure that you're set up very, very early, especially if it's pre-sunrise. And number 2, just making sure you really know the area and the subject so you can maximize, in this case, the sky. Now, tip number 4 comes to us from the exact same location, the exact same day. I got a whole series, and it was really beautiful because I got to work with some subjects I don't normally, this was actually my target subject, subjects I don't normally get to work with. And this is a red-breasted merganser, pre-dawn. You can see a lot of blues in this one. This is well before dawn. And tip number 4 is noise. You've got to be comfortable dealing with noise to get these very low light, soft images. A lot of times when you're 30 minutes before sunrise, there's not a lot of available at light. That means your shutter speeds are going to be a little bit slower, and the noise is probably going to be a lot more than some people are comfortable with. Shot at 8,000 ISO. Now, in order for me to make an image out of it, I had to be comfortable knowing that I was going to be pushing this sensor a little bit. And also, and I'm an ambassador of Topaz products. You heard me mention Sharpen AI before. Topaz denoise for me has saved images like this, taking them from really high noise and very not very comfortable with what it looks like to very, very comfortable posting it. And even something like this cleaned up nice enough that I could print this image. There's enough resolution here, and the file cleaned up nice enough that I could easily have printed this if I want. So tip number 4 is just be comfortable with noise and be prepared to deal with it in your post-processing. If you're not using Topaz Denoise AI, take a look at it. But it's definitely something that's going to be out there in terms of dealing with noise. And now on to tip number 6, an interesting image. I was actually driving home. I was done with my shoot for the day. I'm driving home, and this happens. This color, it's just incredible. I'm near the bay, by the Jersey Shore on the bay side, and I'm thinking I'm just getting out of the car. I find the first available parking space, public parking. I grab my camera. I go lay on this small beach, and anything that was in front of my camera I would have taken a picture of. 2 buffleheads, these are females, slowly drifted in front of the camera at a distance. And I thought, a lot of people would not have taken the opportunity. I just wanted the sky. And tip number 5 is to focus on the sky, even more so than the subject sometimes. Blue hour is all about color. It's that unique time when this is the only time of day you can get these colors. Play with it, maximize it. Maybe focus a little bit less on the subject and really take advantage of the sky and the color. And I thought this was a great example of that tip about just focusing on the sky as much as the subject. While the subjects here are very small in frame, there's absolutely no detail in them, but they do pop really nicely against these colors. And for me, this image was just all about color. So tip number 5, focus on the sky as much as possible. Now, as we're talking about focusing on the sky, I'm going to show you a whole series of images where we really do focus on the sky, but there's one fundamental difference. And that is that all of these images are going to be silhouettes. Tip number 6 is to experiment with silhouettes during blue hour. This normally is going to be a little bit faster shutter speed, which is often good, or changing your exposures overall to focus on the sky and not the subject. So remember I talked earlier about focus on the sky as much as the subject. Here we're actually exposing for the sky to make sure that we don't blow out any of those beautiful colors, and that it will often make our subjects much darker. And this is a great example. This is by John Davis out in California, terrific photographer, who sent this to me as part of my Patreon community. I thought it was just a wonderful example. The composition, not only is the composition great, I love silhouettes where you can identify the species. And in this case, I would imagine this is a great horned owl because you can see the tufts up on top of its head. But when you expose for the sky and you preserve all the beautiful colors, the natural result is often a silhouette. And I think it's a really great use and a really great time of day to play around with silhouettes. So if you've never done this, this will make sure you're exposing for the sky. Take some sample shots, especially if you don't have moving subjects, but you can actually just take pictures of the sky and look at your settings and look at the back of the camera. And then once the subjects come into play, you've got your settings right because you've exposed for the sky. So again, focus on the sky, but also playing around with shutter speeds and exposures, making sure you preserve the sky, and then seeing what you can do with silhouettes. I'm going to show you two more. Pre-dawn here. You can see a little bit of pinks and oranges here starting to play in. If I expose for the heron, the sky gets blown out and I lose all the color. So I'm not really worried about preserving the details on the heron here. All I want is the silhouette and shape, and then I'm going to really focus on the exposure of the sky. And then the same here as we transition kind of into golden hour, but you could see the heron here. And in post-processing here, I actually darkened the heron. I had a little bit of a detail in there. Some features were showing through, and I decided in post-processing, I think make it a little darker. So just playing with silhouettes, it's a great time of day to do that, and really, again, focusing on the colors in the sky. A couple more silhouettes right here. This is an elk I took. I don't particularly find this as a beautiful image. I will show you one that is much better, but I did want to highlight the blue. And this is a little bit more overcast, so you don't get a lot of the golds. They're not showing through, but just a real nice, intense, deep blue pre-dawn. But this one is really special. This is Derek Shenot. He's been on my YouTube live show before. But what a terrific example of a silhouette here. Just powerful, great profile, but it's all about the sky. So I thought this was a terrific example of usage of silhouettes in some non-birds. So yeah, love that one from Derek. I didn't feature a lot of shorebirds and waders in this. I did want to show you a couple quick examples here. I've got a lease tern that I took years ago. The sky, you could just see the pink colors in there. I wanted to show that because it's a beautiful tone that often pops through during blue hour is these light pinks. I want to show you another one by Hiresha Senanayake. And this one, if you look along the horizon, you've got these beautiful purple and blue tones, and it's slowly, almost like a gradient, just filters out into these really soft peach and pinks and oranges. It's a really great example of blue hour. Probably not well before sunrise, but before sunrise, as this transitioning light is starting to occur. Now, it doesn't necessarily have the super ultra blue feel that a lot of people associate with blue hour photography. For me, it works because you still have some of those tones in there. So that transitional time right before the sun comes up can often give you this. And something you'll notice here is there's probably also a little bit of atmosphere. That atmosphere is often helpful because it will cast some light and filter some light in different ways. So you can get very interesting skies when you've got either a little bit of haze on the horizon or light clouds that have started to form. Solid clouds are probably not going to give you they won't give you the same look. It's going to filter out a lot. You may get a kind of a blue, eerie feeling from that overcast, like really heavy overcast conditions. But if you've got light filtered clouds pre-dawn, it is really wonderful to utilize. And then this little heron, right at dawn, I wanted to show you what happens as you transition into golden hour. You could see here, probably just as the sun is hitting the horizon, the difference in light. So I'm going to show you this one before. Notice the tones here. And then as the sun gets on the horizon, it starts to change a little bit. So this one actually, technically not a blue hour image, but very close. It's during that transition period. And the light changes very quickly. Now, my last tip. This is not a blue hour image. I wanted to show it to you for a very specific reason. I was photographing a large flock of snow geese, and there were small pockets of these snow geese out. I had a nice background, mountain backdrop, and another photographer was there. Another birder was there, and they were just taking in a spectacle of literally, I estimate 100,000 snow geese. Now, most of them were in another field, but the light was kind of good on this cluster, this very small flock. And this is what it looked like. It's okay. Pretty flight shot. You could see the golden tones hitting those black areas under the wings. I liked it. And tip number 7, stay and play. Stay and play. I'm going to give you 2 examples here. of what that looks like. And as the sun was setting and it hit the horizon and the gold kind of disappeared real quick, the birder left, the photographer packed up, and then this happened. This is taken 20 minutes later. Same day, same field. Stay and play. Once the sun, I knew with the clouds that were there, I was going to get some neat color. I didn't know it was going to look like this, but I knew I was going to get neat color. And for this series, all I did was focus on and I've showed this scene in other videos I've made. I focused on these clouds because it had just this unbelievable combination of purples and pinks. And it only lasted for a few minutes. Stay and play. Stayed on that cloud, and as every group of snow geese flew through, I would hit that cloud and try to pan. And the look I wanted to get was this motion blur look. You could see the blue tone on the geese. The geese are actually blue. That's the blue hour vibe. I just panned constantly. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of frames, and only a few of them worked the way I wanted. This was one. I'm going to show you another one at the end. Another example, stay and play. This happened just about a week or two ago. I was out photographing some snow geese right near my house. I have a video on it, by the way. Check out that video. I'll put a card up here. It's a 2-minute video. I think it's pretty cool. Photographer was there, shooting snow geese into the blue sky during golden hour. As soon as the sun, and I mean as soon as the sun got low, he said, "Oh, it's a shame. There's no more light. I'm heading out." And he left. I will tell you, I didn't even shoot during the time period because golden hour, but a blue sky, zero interest, just nothing. But wait for the sun to hit the horizon. It starts to go down. The clouds start to change color. And while this isn't like a work of art, I really like it. And again, it really maximizes what was available. Take advantage of what's there. I had some clouds after sunset. I figured this was going to work similar to this. I was able to isolate one or two of these snow geese as they flew in and out. And I got an image that I really liked. Stay and play. Don't leave don't leave at sunrise or at sunset. Don't leave when it hits the horizon. Stay and play. I showed you some short-eared owl images earlier. Same thing. All the photographers pack up and leave. The favorite shots I got that day were blue hour shots. Not a ton of detail. Not one of these hyper detailed portraits, but really, really pretty mood. And that's what you're going to get with blue hour is the mood. Another example of the same type of thing. Stay and play. Now I'm going to show you a couple of images. I've got a series here. This one by Julie Whitbread. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to show you a few more after this as well that I think you'll like from another photographer. Playing with light during blue hour. Look how powerful this is. It looks like a flame on the water. This is a light reflected from the far shoreline onto the water at blue hour. Yes, it's a little high ISO. Conditions are very tough to shoot like this, but look at the results that you can get. I mean, this is special. This is really, really special to me. Really, really well done. So Julie's a patron of mine and was really, really proud of her. And when I saw this, I just thought it was mind-blowing. And I'm going to show you a whole series. This is really a series that I'm impressed with. This is Todd, part of my Patreon group, who has done amazing things. I'm always afraid when photographers get this good, they're gonna leave my community and tell me they don't need me anymore. But he is so good. Wow, look at these images. I'm going to show you the whole series. It's a canvas back. All of this taken before. Look at this. Look at the composition. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. Just incredible. All of these images with a different feel, a different look, similar theme, but all have a different look. Notice the tones in this. You know, this feels so cool, and by cool I mean temperature, but it just has all of those greens and those purples. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And this one I'm going to finish for his work. I'm going to show you my top 3 blue hour photos for me personally. This was my favorite of the collection I got from my Patreons. This is just stunning. This is absolutely just breathtaking. So check these photographers out. I'm going to put them all down in the comments. So both the Instagram challenge winner and my Patreon members. But just so proud. I'm really, really just so proud when I see this stuff. All right, let me give you my top three Blue Hour images. Loved this one. Similar to what you saw in some of Aaron's work. Aaron's work was, I think, even better, more challenging. The light was lower in his images, and it had a little bit more of a dramatic flair. Also, notice he went with silhouettes while I exposed for the bird here. So a little bit different look. I had a little bit more available light, I think, than he did. But again, high ISO, got to be comfortable dealing with noise, had to know my location, had to be prepared, had to be set up. All of those tips I gave you, a lot of them are coming into play right with this one image. It's also a species I don't get to work with a lot, so I really liked it because of that as well. Little piping plover before sunrise, again, utilizing bokeh and far background light. This was just a pleasure. Black-bellied plover on the beach in winter before the sun's coming up, and it's just absolutely one of my favorite shorebird images ever. And then I talked about this piece called Cotton Candy Skies. I showed you one of the series earlier. This was my favorite. I like the composition in this a little bit better. I think environmentally it shows more of the clouds and the colors. And you can't get this color. It's the only way to get this color. You can't fake it. You can't I mean, maybe if you were that good, you could Photoshop it, but you really can't. Slow shutter speed, a 30th of a second, panning snow geese, trying to get the head sharp, trying to get the wings with some motion blur. And really more important than any of that, making sure I just got that color. Blue Hour photography. It can be challenging. It can test your camera. It can test your patience, but it can be so incredibly rewarding because at no other time of day can you get the colors and the spectrum of colors that you will during this pre-dawn and post-sunset. I want you to take a look over here as I put the tips up there as a reminder. Take a look at number 7. If you're shooting at sunset, stay in play. If you take nothing else out of this video, just experiment. Try different shutter speeds, different compositions, look at the sky a little bit differently, see what you can do to incorporate color. I think for those that have not done this before or have just started to experiment a little bit with it, hopefully some of these photos gave you some ideas and inspiration because I think what we shared here was really, really good today. So I want to thank the Patreon community for contributing to this video. I want to thank you guys for your continuing support. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. Hit the like button and also leave a comment and let me know how you like the video. So as always, thank you for your ongoing support, and I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.